Hello and welcome once again to the Legion Beta. A bit of a different type of video this time. Rather than trying to showcase exactly what a Demon Hunter tank is capable of, this is more to show exactly what the dungeon has, specifically with the idea to going in towards Mythic Plus modes, because the trash has mechanics which you will be needing to deal with. So I've done a bit of research, found out all the abilities that each trash has and how you can deal with it. So I will be narrating this to tell you exactly what that stuff is. So the first thing that happens is this guy will break the chains that shield made him. Now these two have abilities called Breach Armor, Fracture, and Hew Soul. Fracture is the line attack you just saw come out there. There's also Barbed Spear. Barbed Spear is something that you will want to be interrupting with a stun, because it can't actually be normally interrupted. It puts a bleed on the tank. Hew Soul is some shadow damage, and it also does a healing absorb. You saw also Swirling Muck. That just puts a patch of shit on the floor that you want to move out of. These birds just do a nature damage sort of bleed effect kind of thing, I think. Anyway, it's not too much of a problem. These birds are always easy to take down. It's the other Vrykul type things that you need to be worrying about. The Soul Keeper is actually pretty easy. He does have quite a substantial health pool and such, but the only thing that you really need to be watching out for with him is something called Defiant Strike, which you will be doing soon. What Defiant Strike does is he just walks in a line, swinging his spear around. Just don't be in the middle of it, and when he reaches his final destination it'll do a small AoE, so just don't be in that. Again with the fractures here, but there's also a caster. The caster you want to be watching out for because he does Fire Blast, that's just fire damage, just interrupt it. And something called Flare, which doesn't need to be interrupted because it just puts a small patch on the floor there. You just saw it very briefly. It's a lot like Tyrant Belhari's fire damage, just don't be in it. So always be aware of the direction these guys are facing, just so you can get out with the fracture nice and easily.
In the sea of soul.
Coming up to this next pack, which is a bit more problematic, since purely based on the fact there's 4 of them, or is it 5? Anyway, again, similar abilities. You've got the fractures, you've got the fire blasts, you've got the barbed spears, the flares, swirling muck. So just be aware of what each one is casting and react accordingly. Barbed spear is honestly the most dangerous thing that you have to deal with here, combined with breach armor. So if you can ever stun breach armor or the barbed spear, that is ideal. The Hew Soul's not a huge problem because it's such a small healing absorption that you can probably self-heal it as a tank, or just a few hots from a healer should deal with it quite nicely too. On to the boss. A lot of this can be found in the dungeon general, but I'll talk about it anyway. Whenever he does that circle, get out of the circle. It can be a little bit tricky if you've got latency, but just be aware of that. Dark Slash is the thing that you want to be watching out for as the tank. Active Mitigation doesn't do anything to reduce it, but if you have an anti-magic type of mitigation, that's what you want to be using, because it is a Dark Slash, which is shadow damage. The other thing he does is the Will of Northrend. It's just a little knockback, not much you can do about that. When he does Bane, which is summoning all these purple swirlies, just be mindful of when he casts Arise Fallen. As you can see, it wasn't quite quick enough there. Arise Fallen turns all the purple blobs into adds, so what you want to do is have all your group running towards the tank just before they spawn, and that'll make it much easier for the tank to grab them all. Just cleave down the skeletons, unless the boss is at like 3% or whatever, and in that case just focus the boss. If you're doing Mythic Plus, it's best to have someone run up to this horn to click it right as the boss is about to die, so like the travel time is saved. It's not much, but every little helps in challenge modes, or Mythic Plus even, because you are on the timers. Okay, you get out the cages and these 2 guys here. These have got something called Soul Siphon, which is a channel drain life, just interrupt it, and 6-pound barrel, which I do get hit by a little here. What it does is roll a barrel across the floor, and everyone hit by it will take damage and get knocked back. There is one that I do avoid in a second, where you can see it just rolling across the floor, so just watch out for it. I'll point it out as well. 6-pound barrel, there it is, just rolling across there. So just be mindful of the barrels rolling around, and try to eat your best to avoid them. It's a little more trickier for the tanks and melee. These ones aren't too bad, except when they do this thing where they actually split up and teleport. They also have an evasion, which you can see in the debuff under the target frame there. So when they do that thing where they split up, they'll appear as like a ghosty version of themselves, and then they'll smack everyone in front of the ghosty versions of themselves. So quite simply, when they split, don't be in front of their shadowy forms. Night Watch Mariner and the dogs. Now the dogs have got kind of like it's kind of like a leap, but you could kind of treat it like a blink strike, so just watch out for them jumping behind you. Lantern of Darkness is the main problem here. It's AoE unavoidable shadow damage, so use active magic mitigation. And he also does something called Bind, which is a bleed. It does initial damage followed by a bleed. You can see it in my debuffs over there where I just moused over. So again, just be mindful of that. It's not a huge problem. It's the Lantern of Darkness that's the main thing. The big giant, he is actually really easy to deal with. The only problem is he has tons of health, so it might not be beneficial to actually kill him when you adding up the percentages. But just be mindful of the shit on the floor that he puts down, and for his Baleful Breath, which is just a line attack in front of him. Simply put, don't be in front of the guy. And when the patches of poison become too much on the floor, just move backwards into another room or wherever else, and just keep moving so that you never have to stand in it. He will eventually go down, just make sure you don't get hit by any of his abilities because they are all avoidable. Moving further on, you don't always have to deal with this pack in Mythic Plus because the doors can open, but if you do have to deal with them, there's Mist Menders and Swift Blades, so watch out for the evasion thing. Shroud Bowl is nothing that you ever need to worry about. So you can see these shadowy forms there, just don't be in front of them when they do their attack. So the casters, they're always the female varicals, and they have quite a variety of abilities actually. So, like I just said, what was it called? Shroud Bolt. You don't need to worry about that. It's just some shadow damage, but it can chain like chain lightning. So just try and stay moderately spread for that. The ones that you really need to worry about are Surging Water, which heals the enemy, Whirlpool of Souls and Torrent of Souls, which both heal enemy and do damage as it channels. So they're the things that you really need to watch out for in Disrupt. The Helajar champions, these guys have got quite a lot of health and damage. They also enrage briefly, which is when they get really big, increases their attack speed. The main thing that you want to watch out for though is Bone Chilling Scream, which is an AoE fear. You can see there they've got really big and got the damage buff. Bone Chilling Scream, you can't stun that, they're immune to stuns, so make sure that you interrupt it. As long as you've got some coordination saying I'll take X and I'll take Skull, or whatever markers you might be using, that is the most efficient way to deal with it, and it isn't difficult.
Hungry from the scent of blood.
Moving on to Boss 2. Boss 2 is actually a huge disappointment, honestly. He's really easy, even in Mythic Plus. Just avoid all of his avoidable damage, which is most of it. His Cosmic Scythe, his puddles of crap on the floor, don't be in those. When he fractures or does servitors, just interrupt that Void Snap, that's the most important thing here. And just kill the ads. Like, he summons that ad which costs Void Snap and he fractures the target. Here he fractures the Demon Hunter into a load of little ads of himself. Just kill them because the guy's stunned, I think, while it's happening. Cosmic Scythe, it's quite clear when he's going to do it. It says he's going to cast it and he does it behind his head and just does it in a line attack, so just don't be in that. Just moves to the side. And just be mindful of the puddles on the floor, because they do slowly grow over time. They will despawn during the fight as well, but just try and control where they're spawning so that they tend to overlap a little, and he will eventually go down without too much of a trouble.
Life, death, I am but one ripple in the eternal ebb and...
So now what happens is more ads spawn from the front of the boat and walk up to the positions that they will eventually end up in. The first two are champions, and they spawn on both sides of the boat, so you can take whichever direction you wish to take. Again, like I said earlier with the champion, it does the AoE fear and it gets the enrage. But since there's only one of them here, it's a lot more easy to deal with, although you can pull both of them from either side if you're a bit behind on the percentage meters on Mythic Plus. Moving up to the female Varicule again, so watch out for the heal, which is the Surging Water, and the Whirlpool of Souls and Torrent of Souls. If you do have spare interrupts, whether it be through a Blood Elf racial, stuns, or any other means, then by all means interrupt the Shroud Bolt, but it's the Torrent and the Whirlpool that you really need to be on top of, and the Surging of course. So the Swift Blade, again with his evasion ability, just try not to use any major hard hitting abilities with a cooldown. whilst he's under the effect of evasion, because it can easily be wasted. So just try and use your basic generators and melee attacks or whatever you've got. Moving even further on, we've got a champion and a Mistcaller here, so again, interrupt all the Mistcaller's healing abilities or damage abilities beyond Shroud Bolt, because it's not that important, but try and keep an interrupt in the bag for the champion sphere. Just always make sure that you can do that. Try and prioritise using stuns on the healing ad, and try and save an interrupt for the champion if possible. And lastly, you may need to pull more trash than this, but this is the last pack. Soul Keepers and Swift Blades. Again, watch out for the evasion, watch out for the splitting of the forms, don't be in front of it. And the Soul Keeper does the Defiant Strike, which is just get out of the way of, and don't be near him for his final strike, which does a little bit of AoE. There you can see at the end the Defiant Strike slams down and does a 7-yard AoE. Moving on to the Captain of the Boat, which is kind of like a mini-boss. So the Captain does Debilitating Shout, which you want to interrupt because it does stacking damage increase. He also does Give No Quarter, which kind of teleports to an area and does an AoE ability, so try and be mindful of that. It can be a bit hard to predict at times, but try your best to avoid it. The Skeleton ads, the Warriors aren't too much of a problem, but the casters, they do Necrotic Bolt, and they can also do a necrotic buff that they give themselves, which explodes at 3 stacks, doing damage to everybody. So try to interrupt them if they aren't getting cleaved down fast enough, or just stun them, Sigil of Silence them, Blood Elf Racial, whatever you've got. Just try your best not to let them get casts off, but they should die to cleave quite easily. And that's the last of it for the trash. Now it's just Helya. So Helya has 2 phases, well, 3 I suppose, but 2 main phases. You have to kill her, well, get her to 80% to end the encounter over the 2 phases. So try your best to stand where I am right now if you've got AoE, because AoE has a habit of hitting the tentacles on either side as well as this Destructor Tentacle. What you want to try and do is kill the Destructor Tentacle and then get as much uptime on the side tentacles as you possibly can, because the quicker these die, the better it is. As a tank, you want to be watching out for Destructor Tentacles spawning out of the boat, so it'll just pop up from below deck. Try your best to get to that location as soon as possible, because if you let no one's in melee range of it, it will do this Slam ability, which hits everybody and debuffs them and just does general nasty things like bleeds and what have you. So just kill the Destructor Tentacles as soon as they spawn. Blackwater Barrage, like, this one doesn't exactly clearly show it, but her arm, which as you can see it's her left arm, it raises into the air. That is the side of the boat you want to not be on, because that's the side of the boat that'll get hit by Blackwater Barrage. So just whenever you get the warning saying she's about to cast it, just quickly tilt your camera, have a look at what she's up to, see where her arm is pointing, and don't be at that side of the boat. Again with the Destructive Tentacles, these just continue spawning until all the tentacles are dead. Now this is technically phase 3, really, where she disappears, tentacles keep spawning, things keep spawning out of the boat. Just avoid it. When she comes back up, you want to be interrupting something called Torrent. You want to be moving to the left or the right, or whichever way is not the way that she is facing for the shout ability she does, the like channeled purple stuff, Corrupted Bellow. But other than that, she doesn't really have a great deal going for her, really. She's constantly spawning these sort of whitish kind of things on the floor. Don't be in them. She spawns greenish things on the floor. Don't be in those. It's about as simple as it gets, really. Just classic don't stand in the fire type of abilities, whatever colour the fire may be. Just try and be mindful when you're trying to get out of the Corrupted Bellow that you don't end up in areas that the tentacles have broken through the bottom of the deck, because that is when, yeah, you kind of get the sorry, I'm completely going off track here. But yeah, if you go in the holes where the tentacles were, you'll get stunned. And if you get stunned while trying to get out of Corrupted Bellow and you end up in Corrupted Bellow stunned, you're going to take quite a few ticks of that quite nasty damage. She will eventually go back under below deck again, and it'll be like the previous phase. Just keep avoiding stuff, and when she comes back up, just finish her off. Visually a stunning boss, but the mechanics are actually quite simple to deal with. So that is the Maw of Souls. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.